Coming down the trail here, see this nice grove of coast live oak before me, and it's in this canyon here. Pretty extensive. There's a lot of evidence of Aboriginal people that lived in this area and hunted and gathered here. And coast live oak was one of the staples of their diet. I've been told that the Chumash native people here on the Central Coast in California, that the acorn constituted about 80% of their diet. The women and the children were the primary gatherers. They would work at gathering the acorns and milling them with a mano and a matate. A mano being a hand stone, and the matate, the grinding stone. Sometimes they would just use a rock shield that they would find in the earth, and they'd use the hand stone and just work there and process acorns. And of course, the thing was the acorn diet was constipative, so they had to balance their diet with a laxative, a natural laxative. So they would use like coffee berry. You see a lot of coffee berry growing around in this area, and also a holly-leafed cherry plant was used. I see some wild blackberry vines down here, but no fruit at this time of year. It's not spring yet, and nothing on them. But yeah, they would gather the acorns and shell them, and then put the nut meat into baskets, woven watertight baskets, and soak the acorn meat, the nut meat, and it's full of tannins. If you ever take an acorn and break it open and pop here's a woods rat's den. These were popular edible with the native people, and the way they worked this, they would check it out. If it's active, you'll find green, fresh greens around the openings where the rat's going in and out. This is a pack rat. A dusky-footed woods rat is the proper name. And the rat uses like bay leaves as an anti-pest material to line its nest with, keep fleas down, keep fleas away. And there's another one over here behind this. They oftentimes will establish them in colonies. See, there's one back in there. Some of them can get really tall, like 6 or 8 feet high. I've seen some huge ones. Very active rats. And let's see what we got here. This is sticky monkey flower starting to come in. This is an antiseptic quality to it if you crush the leaves and rub it on something. Coyote bush. This makes a wash for poison oak. Yeah, these woods are just full of everything. And then up here you've got usnea, or old man's beard. They use this for diapering. It has a antibacterial quality, and the ladies used it for their sanitary needs. And they also use it as a packing for their valuables or their belongings that might break easily, like shell necklaces, things like that. It's kind of like the styrofoam or popcorn or bubble wrap of its day, primitive bubble wrap. And it grows at whatever elevation the fog normally settles in. It's an air plant, and so it grows on the branches of the oaks, and it gets its sustenance, its water, from the morning fog. But back to the acorns. So they bleach the tannic acid out of the acorns and make them palatable because they're very bitter unless you process them. And then they could grind it into a meal real fine for like making porridges or frying or making cakes, fire cakes, things like that. Now they in the winter months, in the cold season, they would move into these woodlands for extra shelter and build their wickiups in here and get a little more shelter from the weather. In the nicer months, like in the summer, they would just move right on down by the bay, and they would just build their wickiups or even just sleep out in the open out there. But yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. They did not have any kind of a vessel that they could boil anything in. They didn't have any metal vessels, so they would use stone bowls or baskets and heat rocks, and then place the rocks into their basket or their stone bowl to achieve a boil, and then put their acorn meal into the basket or bowl and cook it up, and they would have a hot porridge. And then down here we've got, this is plantain. This is narrow leaf plantain, and the Indians called this the white man's footprint. It was a native of Europe, and they brought it here. And this is pretty useful stuff. I actually got a really bad sting one day from a wasp on my head, and so I popped some of that in my mouth, and I chewed it up, and I plastered it onto the sting, and it instantly took the pain away. Really excellent. Hello, how are you?
Finding something good?
Oh yeah.
What?
How are you?
What are you finding?
Oh well, I was just talking about this plant back here. This is plantain.
Okay.
And this was called the white man's footprint by the Indians. It's a native of Europe, and it's really got a really nice quality. If you get an insect sting, if you take some of those leaves and pop them in your mouth and chew it into a mush.
Now which one?
This one right here.
That one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is narrow leaf plantain, and there's a broad leaf, but it's a native of Europe. It was brought here by the Europeans that settled.
Okay.
It grew everywhere, so the Indians came to call it the white man's footprint.
It showed there'd been an invasion.
Yeah, and so they were pretty familiar with it, but if you chew it into a mush, and if you have a bad sting,
rub it on.
you just plaster it on like a poultice.
Okay, because she gets so many tick bites.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll work on that.
It would work on, and they turn into this crusty, pretty little sore.
Mm-hmm. Quarter horse?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lesson for you there too, folks. When you're on the trail and you're hiking, you should yield to horses and riders. They have the right of way. You have the right of way over bicyclists, but riders, hello baby, horsemen and riders, they have the right of way over us. And you never know about a horse. If they're skittish, maybe they're just green broke and they're learning, so you want to let that rider have all the advantage, you know, and step off the trail and greet the rider so the horse can kind of sense that you're not a threat. They're very perceptive animals. But have respect for riders.
And if they hear you talking, that really helps.
Does it?
They know you're human. Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's really good. I think probably the worst thing would be to probably be quiet and act
right.
odd.
If you're quiet and you've got a big backpack on, then they don't recognize you. So but when they hear a voice, they almost instantly say, "Oh, it's just a person."
What kind of problems have you run into with hikers on a trail? Have they,
Not
do they
much
approach the horse without?
Sometimes when they just don't get it, you know, like if they're like if a guy's carrying a little kid on his back or something, and it just makes the shape all different. All
Okay.
wrong. But generally, everybody, out
Yeah.
in these parks is really,
Well,
really
they
good.
survive by their savvy, you know. I mean,
Yeah, and by
they're
being afraid of things.
exactly.
and
They are a prey
reacting.
animal. You know, they have one response, and that's the run. Although they can kick pretty darn hard.
Yeah,
And,
and that's it's more likely that they would whirl and go off the side of a cliff or something, and that's why they give horses the right of way,
Right.
because they can get you hurt so badly
Absolutely.
compared to a person just stepping off to the side. So
Yeah.
we all really appreciate it. when-
No,
when
no.
people
So
become
yeah,
aware of
definitely
that.
step off the trail, greet the rider, make your presence known, let the horse have a good look at you, and give the right of way to the rider because they've got their hands full.
And bring carrots.
And bring carrots. Have a great ride. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. So that was kind of fun to get a little lesson on the side of the trail while we're here. And we'll see what else we see in here this morning. So over here, looks like more sticky monkey plant. Yeah, the underside of these leaves is sticky. This the flower has people think the flower looks like a monkey's face, so it got that name. The sticky comes from the underside of this leaf, is very sticky, and it's a defense against bugs. The bugs stick to it and get caught, and so they can't devour the plant. So I think we're going to emerge from the trail here. I think I see another woods rat's nest in there. Oh, I didn't finish talking about how they hunted these. Now, the way these were hunted, the Indians would have a long stick, and it was probably 4 or 5 feet long, and it had a notch cut in the end. And I learned this from Paul Campbell. Paul was a wonderful instructor who taught primitive survival skills of the native Californians, and he has a book by that title, and I highly recommend it if you can get a copy of it. It's just wonderful. And Paul has passed. He died a few years ago, I believe, cancer, sadly. Wonderful man. I didn't know him well or long, but the few times I got to spend with him and learn from him, he had such a wealth of knowledge. So they would probe. It was a long probe stick, and they would push it down into the nest and press it in and try to feel the rat out. It was a probe, and if they could feel the rat, if it, they squished it, they'd give the stick a twist, and that notch in the end would bind up in the rat's fur, and going back out into the light here, would bind up in the rat's fur, and they could pin it down and then break the nest apart and drag the rat out, and they would just throw it right on the fire and cook it, and intact till it popped, kind of like use its own skin as a turkey cooking bag. And they'd eat it all. I mean, they'd crush the bones and eat them for the calcium and eat the entrails and everything. They weren't picky about it at all. They'd just burn the hair off and eat it that way. California native Indians here used a fairly light poundage bow, and they didn't bring it up to their cheek and draw it back. They just kind of fired from the hip. Just a real kind of a quick pluck of the string, and a very instinctive style of shooting. See, we're back in the Usnea here. It's right at head level here, where this branch is hanging down. Oh, look at the size of that monster woods rat's nest over there. You see that? That is a big woods rat's nest. That is as tall as me. That's at least 5'7". Yeah, that's a big one. I don't know if they keep adding on to them, or if another rat adopts it and builds it up, or how that works. But anyway, so they'd have 2 or 3 archers standing around, and if the rat came charging out, if it fled, one of them was bound to pop it. And so they'd get their meal that way. Now here's a pile of material over here. And this really makes me wonder if maybe a rat isn't starting a nest there. And so maybe this is how it begins. I mean, it must begin in that way. It has 2 or 3 chambers in it and entry points where it can flee out of. And so maybe they just are active and they just keep building on it. I'm sure they must, because I've seen them along the trail where one time they're a certain height, and then I passed by a couple months later and they're much larger, so clearly they must be constantly building on them. So anyway, I'm gonna end this video here and get back to hiking. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about some of the things I was seeing out here today, and we'll chat you up later. Thanks for coming along.